Parshas Tazria, Shabbos Tazria-Hachodesh, Tavshin Ayin Dalet. Nice big crowd here tonight. A lot of new faces. Over the past couple of years, each time we reached the Parshas of Parshas Tazria, Parshas Mitzorah, which it will be next week, each year we discussed the grave sin, the Avera of Lashon Hara. And really it's something that's kedai to reiterate, to speak about each and every year. And really there's never enough of an awareness of this terrible Avera, this Avera of Lashon Hara. And anyone who spends just a little bit time even learning through the Sfarim of the Chafetz Chaim on this inyan, you begin to understand what a negative effect Lashon Hara has on a person, on a person's life, on your parnasa, on your family, and of course a person's standing and its future in Olam Haba. All these things are very, very negatively affected by this Avera of Lashon Hara. And the Chafetz Chaim Bemis tells us, and it's a very, very scary thing, the Chafetz Chaim tells us that a person could spend his entire life, imagine this, you spend your entire life doing mitzvahs, masim tovim, chesed, and yet a person can show up in Olam Haba and you come up there and empty-handed. You have nothing left. But your entire life, you learned Torah, you did chesed, you think you did everything right, you come there, the Chafetz Chaim tells you that you're going to come there, and if you spoke Lashon Hara, if you had a disregard for this chait, you're going to come up there and you're going to be empty-handed. And what a shock that's going to be to a person. And not only that, says the Chafetz Chaim, he says that the people that you spoke Lashon Hara about, the person that you spoke about, he or she will now have all your schusim. And you know, it's interesting because it's very difficult to understand this. I mean, as much as I try to wrap my mind around this whole person devotes their entire life to good things, to Torah, to come up there, you have nothing, the other person gets, it's very, very difficult to wrap your mind around it, to understand how that happens. However, one thing I do know, one thing I could think about, and one thing I know, and what I know is that you could trust the Chafetz Chaim. I can't understand it, I don't know where it comes from. But the Chafetz Chaim, they say, is right, one of the last people that we know very possibly had Ruach HaKodesh. The Chafetz Chaim really knew what was going on. So if the Chafetz Chaim says that it's so, then we could trust the Chafetz Chaim. And we could understand the seriousness of this Avera. And it's certainly kedai to listen to what the Chafetz Chaim has to say. Yet, some people, they're very, very sick with this sickness. The sickness of talking negatively about other people, and the feeling that you get, the feeling that you need to comment about everyone and everything. It's like a sickness. People can't stop doing it. And the Chafetz Chaim says a very interesting thing also, and this is also brought down in other Sfarim. He says, you know, people spend a lot of energy and time in their lives. They run to this Gadol for this bracha. They run to this Mekubal for another bracha. They do this segula. They do every segula they could possibly think of. A segula for parnasa, a segula for helping to bring up your children in the right way. Yet the Chafetz Chaim says that the biggest segula a person can do, the biggest segula you can do, is to watch what comes out of your mouth. You run around to this gadol, to this person, to this thing, to that mekubal. The real thing that you have to do is to watch what you say, watch what comes out of your mouth. Yet, we see from life's experience, you hang around a little bit, you see that time after time, people fall, and they fall prey to this Yetzer Hara. And they constantly do this Avera over and over. No, it's not really Lashon Hara on a person like this. No, this is not what the Torah is talking about. This is not what the Chachamim told us. A person like this, nah, he's not the kind of person can't speak Lashon Hara. And the Yetzer Hara has so many different ways of convincing us that it's mutter, and really they're all usher. There's no, there's no way around it. Yet we keep giving ourselves excuses. And time after time we slip up. And you know what happens after a while? We give up. We say, you know what, I don't have the strength to fight the Yetzer Hara. I don't have the strength to overcome this, this idea of Shmir Lashon. I'm not able to do it. It's too much. And that, I was thinking, that is where the juxtaposition of the Parshios of this week, the Parsha of Tazria, and the Parsha that we lay in, the Tazria-Hachodesh, that's where this comes in. The Nesivos Shalom speaks a lot, discussing the inyan of Parshas Hachodesh, the inyan of his chadshus, the inyan of renewing oneself, the inyan of starting over. We all know that Klal Yisrael, the Bayidin, we're lunar people. We follow the calendar. Our calendar follows that of the lunar calendar, that of the moon. And we know that the moon, every single month, the moon waxes and wanes, right? The moon gets smaller and smaller and smaller till it just about disappears and then comes back again. And it's very interesting to note, we spoke about this actually a couple of years ago, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not create the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every month we know that the moon gets smaller and smaller. Why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world where every single month, when it comes near the end of the month, let the moon blow up and be gone, and let's place a new moon in the sky? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us that no, if it blew up, then it would be a new person, a new thing. Hashem is telling you that you, the same person that sometimes gets smaller and smaller and needs a renewal and needs his chadshus, don't think that you have to blow the entire universe up to start again, to renew yourself, to be something special, to be something big, to be a gadol. It doesn't mean that you have to blow up the whole system. You're able to have this koyach of his chadshus. Yes, you, the same person that got smaller and smaller and smaller, Parshas Hachodesh. It teaches us his chadshus, that same moon is the same one. The one that got smaller is the same one that gets larger. And you know what happens? It happens time after time. Every single month the moon gets smaller. And a person can sometimes fall, not just like we spoke about in the Chet of Lashon Hara. A person could fall in so many different things. And you could fall again and again. You do the same thing over and over. You act like the moon. You keep getting smaller every month. But you know what? You can start again. That's the koyach of his chadshus. You, the same person, renewal. You could start over again. And today, today we understand it a little bit as today it's very much easy to understand because we have something today called a reset button, right? Today it's very easy. You go to a PC, you go to a computer, go to your iPhone, or I don't know if it's mutter. You hit one button, you can reset the whole thing. Everything's going haywire, everything's going wrong. You reset it. That's its chadshus. That's Parshas Hachodesh. You can once again start growing spiritually. And this year doesn't happen often. This year it falls out that Parshas Tazria and Parshas Hachodesh fall out in the same Shabbos. In other words, we can learn a lesson from here that this terrible stain of Lashon Hara, or the Averis that bring the Goyim, it's not only Lashon Hara, it's the Chazal list about 17 of Lashon Hara is the most famous one. When we talk about the Goyim and Saras, that we say that Lashon Hara is one of the most grave sins, and Lashon Hara is one of the most famous ones. But for all these things that the Goyim are brought, this week you have an opportunity to renew yourself. You have an opportunity to make a commitment to renew yourself, to be mechazik yourself, to start again in this inyan of Shmir Lashon. You see, the Shalom says on this pasuk at the beginning of Parshas Tazria, Adam, a person, ki yiyeh ba'or b'soroi se'eis oy sapachas oy vaheres, 3 different types of negoyim, v'hu vo'el ha'aroin ha'koyin. You have to bring it to show to a kohen. You have to bring the nega to a kohen. Oy alachad miborav hakoyanim. What happens then? V'ro'ah koyenes hanega ba'or habosar. The kohen sees the nega on a person's flesh. Umarei hanega, the pasuk says, amoik me'or b'soroi. It's deeper than the actual surface of your skin. Then the pasuk says, nega tzarasu. The Kohen looks at it, he sees that it's omoik, it's deeper, and he says that nega tzarasu, it's nega tzarasu. The Kohen is telling us over here that the nega that comes from Averis like Lashon Hara, the Nesivos Shalom says that the Pasuk says, omoik me'ar b'sarai. It's deep. It's deeper. There's an inner deficiency. When a nega comes to a person, and a person gets a nega on their skin from speaking Lashon Hara, the Torah is telling us, says in Nesivos Shalom, the Kohen looks at it and he says that the nega is omoik me'ar b'sarai. You're doing this avera, but there's an inner deficiency. There's something very, very deep inside that you have to fix up. Much like the Nesivos Shalom compares it to a physical wound. Sometimes a person will have a physical wound on their skin, and he'll go to a doctor, and the doctor will take one look at the wound, and he'll see, now you know there's an infection, it's much, much deeper. So it has to be treated internally also. It has to be treated in a much deeper way than just doing something about, in order to remedy it, a surface remedy is not going to do the trick. And the Emes says in Nesivos Shalom, it works the same with Ruchnias. There are Averis like Lashon Hara, where the Yetzer Hara has such a hold on a person where the result shows outwardly. You see the nega, but the Kohen is telling the person, "Amoik me'ar b'sarai." Go home and do some inner. You have to do some inner fixing up. You have to do some soul searching over here. You have to start from the inside. The pagam that you caused is amoik. It's much, much deeper. And what's the remedy, says in the Nesivos Shalom? You have to come close. The Kohen represents Kedusha. If a person wants to have a positive effect, no matter where you've been, for this koyach of his chachas, for this Tazria-Hachodesh, no matter how low you've sunk, no matter how many things you've done wrong, a yid always has this koyach of his chachas to renew yourself. But in order to renew yourself, v'huva el ha-kohen, that's another lesson in this week's parsha. You have to work hard at changing the direction. And this is the week that we learn that. We add Tazria-Hachodesh onto the parsha of Negoim this week, onto the parsha of Tazria, to tell you that even a sin like Lashon Hara, even if you gave yourself 25,000 heterim, why Lashon Hara doesn't apply for you. And now finally this week, this year, you're waking up. We learn a lesson from Parshas Tazria. We learn a lesson now that you could renew yourself. Tazria-Hachodesh. And I was thinking, this is something that does not say in the Nesivos Shalom. I was thinking to myself that many times, the Chavetz Chaim, we mentioned at the beginning of the Shir, the Chavetz Chaim talks about people that run around for segulas, for parnosa, for this, for that. And I was thinking that sometimes people go for a segula, they want to have either to have children or to have children that grow up in the right way, that are banim, talmidei chachamim, and everything. I thought about it. I said, if you look, the beginning of this week's parsha, on Parshas Tazria, and the beginning talks about someone who has children. Isha ki Tazria, v'yolda zachar or nekeva, a person who has children. If you take a look, the parsha of having children is right between the end of last week's parsha. Talks about what you're allowed to eat and what you're allowed to put in your mouth. And the beginning of this week's parsha, right after Isha ki Tazria, right after that, the beginning of this week's parsha talks about things that come out of your mouth. And it's not a coincidence, I'm sure, that the parsha of having children, you want children, you want a segula for children, you want a segula for good children. It's right between watch what goes into your mouth and watch what comes out of your mouth. Let's take those lessons. I don't know, I just thought of it before I got here, so you could all think about it. I could listen to all the commentary, whether it maybe it's a good shot or not. But either way, you could take these lessons and use it for this week. Parshas Hachodesh, let's use it to renew ourselves and to grow from this week's parsha.